So it's been quite a while since we've had a long discussion about Anthony Richardson and Anthony Richardson alone. And generally, when you bring up the topic of Anthony Richardson amongst Colts fans, people are going to respond in one of two ways. You're going to have one side of the aisle that's going to say, oh man, Anthony Richardson is ass. He's not the guy. He's got to go. And then you're going to have the other side of the equation where people are basically going to say it's everybody's fault but his that he did not play up to par this past season. And there's really not all that much middle ground. Generally speaking, broad stroke, when you see people talk about Anthony Richardson. Now, whether or not you believe that Anthony Richardson is going to be the franchise guy for the Indianapolis Colts is not really the point of today's episode, because in my opinion, that really only scratches the surface of the discussion with him. And one of the things I had said, if we were to rewind back now to the 2023 offseason, which of course is the offseason where we acquired Shane Steichen and then drafted Anthony Richardson, I said that what we did in that offseason would set the stage for what we see out of this franchise for the next 5 to 10 years. And while we have not gotten that far yet in that 5 to 10 year path, we do enter an offseason where we seem to be at a very pivotal point in that trajectory. And we can talk about the GM, we could talk about the coaching, we could talk about the defense, and we have at length, and particularly the defense we're going to continue to talk about as the offseason goes on. Those are all perfectly valid discussions, but make no mistake, at the end of the day, when you talk about the Colts being a successful franchise and a winning team, it all comes down to Anthony Richardson, okay? It's always come down to Anthony Richardson. In this league, with all the great quarterbacks, particularly in the AFC, you are not going to win a lot of games with consistency if you don't have a guy that you can trust at the quarterback position with the keys to your franchise. And the way that Anthony Richardson played this past season, you just cannot have that. Development aside, still learning aside, that is not going to cut it at any level as a starter in the NFL. I mean, that is a very highly coveted job. There's only 32 starting jobs in the league, okay? In the world even, right? Because the NFL is the premier of the premier. There's only 32 starting quarterback jobs on planet Earth. And to go out there and play like that, it's just not going to get it done. And you do wonder what exactly caused inaccuracy at such a scale, because it's not to say that Anthony Richardson brings absolutely nothing positive. We know his ability to make an explosive play, but at the same time, the accuracy issues, drops aside, I think drops, I know he had like the highest drop rate in the league. One of you guys was kind enough to send me a bunch of information, and I did tell you I was going to cover it to some degree, so I apologize that I'm not doing it in depth, but you're talking, if you got rid of Anthony Richardson's drops, he would be over 50%, but barely. I mean, to the tune of what? Maybe even 52.8%, which is going to be a number that becomes relevant in this episode, okay? Point being is, no matter how you look at it, that's not enough. And why was he so inaccurate? I don't know, right? But you'd have to imagine it was a combo of, one, him not having the mental side of things fully formed, right? In terms of, okay, how am I going to be composed within the speed of an NFL game? And then you couple that with perhaps not having a strong enough foundation mechanically to be able to execute, right? To actually execute a consistent throwing motion throughout the course of a game when things break down and don't go according to plan, or things are just moving really, really fast, right? It's those two things, because it's one thing to understand a play and how it's going to attack a defense, and it's also another thing to be able to understand how to throw the ball. I think if you got Anthony Richardson in a low-stress environment, I think he could tell you every play, what it's supposed to do, his first, second, third read, and I damn well know for sure that he can throw a football. But it is an entirely different thing to be able to get that done at a high level in the speed of an NFL game. And right now, make no mistake about it, Anthony Richardson needs to have the offseason of his life right now. And it's not even just about his job and his future with the Colts being on the line, but you're talking about just about everyone's job being on the line, whether you want to talk about Shane Steichen, Jim Bob Cooter, or Chris Ballard himself. All of their jobs right now are resting on the shoulders of a young Anthony Richardson who turns 23 years of age in May, meaning that as I record this, he's 1 year removed from legally being able to have a sip of alcohol. And listen, all of that stuff I just said, I do understand that that's the reality of being a quarterback in this league, okay? That's just what it is. Again, a very highly coveted job and position, okay? But remove that side of things for just a second, and let's just talk about the human side of this thing, okay? There is an immense amount of pressure on this young man. Can you imagine being in the situation that he is in? I mean, just imagine being 23 years old, having an entire city looking at you. And we all know how much Indiana loves sports, okay? And how much they love football. Just imagine the entire city looking at you for a little bit of hope. You have grown-ass men counting on you to feed their families. I mean, what were you doing at 23 years old? How does it compare to the situation that Anthony's in, okay? I mean, would you have been able to handle that level of expectation when you think back to your brain and yourself when you were 23 years of age? That level of responsibility? I'm not even sure I can handle that now, and I'm 28. Not that it's all that much older, but my point is that, I mean, come on, that is tough stuff. You know, the expectations being a quarterback aside, just the human side of things. I mean, that is not an easy position to be in, right? Let alone the fact that now they're talking about maybe even bringing in someone else. You can work your ass off and maybe not even actually get the chance to show it on Sundays. You have really no clue, right? I mean, it is all on the line for Anthony Richardson this offseason. Now, we have gotten some good news, right? One, he's going into this offseason healthy, or at least seemingly so, versus last year, where it was really just about being able to get to the point where you could throw the football again after having that shoulder surgery. And now we've heard that he's working with Chris Hess, a biometric expert, best known for having worked with Josh Allen. I'm sure I'm not breaking any news for you on that. Josh Allen credits him as being the most influential person in his mechanical career. Josh Allen went from completing 52.8% of his passes when he went into working with Chris Hess to completing nearly 70% of his passes. And when we listened to Anthony Richardson in his late season media availability, and they asked him, the media, of course, that is, what he needed to do to take the next step as a quarterback. I mean, he said exactly what it is that he needed to say, right? He said it's one thing to be able, I'm paraphrasing, of course, it's one thing to be able to make a big play and get the ball down the field. But at the same time, you do have to, one, be able to take what the defense gives you, and two, not just recognize that, but be able to make those throws with consistently to keep the offense moving, to consistently execute throughout the course of a game, right? Make the easy throws look easy. Anthony Richardson is very much aware that that is what it is that he needs to do to, take the Colts to a place where they have not been in quite a period of time, right? Since he who shall not be named, okay? So him working with Chris Hess is really kind of exactly what the doctor ordered on that front. Does it mean that that's exactly how that's going to work and he's going to turn into Josh Allen? No, it doesn't mean that. But Josh Allen was the guy that many of us looked at as the blueprint for Anthony Richardson's potential trajectory in this league. And you will have a lot of people say, well, that's just Josh Allen. That's an exception, not the rule to what it is progression as an NFL quarterback. And there certainly is a lot of validity to that for sure. But there is another side of that argument, and that is this, that nothing can be done until it's done. For example, history lesson right here. For a really long time, people thought it was physically impossible to run a 4-minute mile, okay? Until a guy by the name of Roger Bannister ran a sub 4-minute mile in the 1950s. And when he did that, what was once considered impossible all of a sudden had been done. It broke a lot of perceived limitations around what the human body was capable of and what was possible when it came to really the speed of a mile, right? I know for me and you who don't run, that's not a big deal. But at the time, for people who were in that space, it was absolutely a big deal. And then once he did it, after something that had been considered impossible for years, once he did it, all of a sudden, other people started getting it done. What was once an impossible feat, all it took was seeing someone else do it. All it took was seeing the blueprint. And now, as of a few years ago, the story's a little outdated, over 1,700 people have accomplished a sub 4-minute mile. So sure, Josh Allen having achieved what he achieved was improbable, and AR achieving the same is also improbable, but perhaps now a little less improbable than when Josh Allen did it, as now he can look at what Josh Allen did, a guy who's built in the same mold as him, and follow that script And that looks like exactly what he's going to try to do. Now, on a side note, he should probably talk to Jaden Daniels too. Have you heard this story? Jaden Daniels is using a VR headset at 6 a.m. every morning to simulate in-game reps. It is essentially allowing him to be in a fully immersive experience that is putting him in real game scenarios. And that is groundbreaking stuff. Now, some of you may be older and might have an idea of what virtual reality is. And I'm not saying that to insult your intelligence. I just know that it's like high-tech stuff. And like if I talk to my dad about it, he would get it, but it would be maybe a little bit over his head, I think. I don't know. He'll let me know. I think he watches the show. So some of you may view that as a little bit of nonsense, like, oh, like who cares? Like, VR, all that stuff. That is not nonsense, okay? That is the real deal and can possibly change the way quarterbacks train forever, okay? To be able to simulate game reps from a mental side of things without actually going into an NFL game is something that has never been able to be done. It's pretty amazing. And I think if Anthony Richardson maybe has a conversation with Jaden Daniels and couples that, right, with working with Chris Hess, we can see a monster leap, given health, of course, a monster leap from Anthony Richardson because the results, well, the proof is in the pudding. You got Jaden Daniels having just a spectacular year and now in the NFC Championship game. So that's kind of what Anthony Richardson's looking at this offseason. Of course, the Colts are going to have to do things to come in and help him, but he has to help them help him. What movie is that? That's the one with movie references lately. Tom Cruise, Jerry Maguire. Help me help you, right? That's what the Colts are looking at Anthony Richardson saying right now. And this offseason is going to really decide the fate of not only him, but maybe quite a few others in the organization. And we're going to find out quite a bit about Anthony Richardson. If he's the guy that we think he's supposed to be, he at minimum is going to come back next year much improved. So that right there was an episode. You've made it to the end. Congratulations. Like and subscribe if you have not yet. Of course, we're on the journey to 5,000 over here. Not even close. One person at a time. If you keep coming back, enjoying the content, that's all good and well. Maybe today's the day. But my name was Justin. This right here was the Ride in the Bench Colts podcast. And as always, go Colts.